That's sort of my thing, right? Thank you so much.
You gotta really know this guy's background.
Yeah, there are careers here that talk about this one.
Getting a lot of emails.
There are a couple of members who stepped out, so we'll just wait till they're back. I guess it's a good sign when the members are willing to publicly badmouth you on the record. It's
Better now than Tuesday.
comfortable. All right, wait for one more.
Let me take care of that. One or two. Just check in. Yeah. I'm just checking.
I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. Good morning. Welcome to this work session, executive appointment confirmation hearing for Lance Wilber. Before we get started, we'll take the roll.
Paul Marshall, Exalto. Crystal Kennedy.
John Weddle.
Austin Quinn Davidson.
Felix Rivera. Christopher Constant on the phone.
Amy Allen.
Thank you.
Lance Wilber.
Nikki Chewbacca.
Barbara Jones. Christina Hendrickson.
Tom McGrath.
Emily Giddens, reporter.
DJ Callahan, myself, appointed government watchdog.
Thank you. Next, we will turn to Mr. Chewbacca in place of the municipal manager, who will be introducing our appointee.
Chris Forrest just joined.
Oh, and Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Vice Chair Constant. I'm introducing a man who, it seems, needs no introduction, Lance Wilber. He's a graduate of Oregon State University and Eastern Washington University. Lance holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning. He has served in a variety of leadership roles in the municipality, as you know, and I'm confident to know that he's looking forward to continuing his service if confirmed by this assembly as Public Works Director. Lance previously served as the director of the municipality's Office of Management and Budget, which has afforded him significant experience in implementing the actions required to develop and coordinate programs and projects within and between departments, to monitor capital and operating budgets and measure performance and management policies. Lance has also held a number of other positions with the muni. He's been the municipality's public transportation director, responsible for operations of the bus system, paratransit service, and share ride van pool programs. And he's been the municipality's traffic department director, responsible for a long range transportation planning and capital programming, traffic engineering, signage, traffic signal operations, intersection improvements, and the municipal area-wide communication system. Lance also has served as the Central Region Director for the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, with leadership, management, and oversight of design, construction, maintenance, and operations, and the administrative services for a region serving over 50% of Alaska's population. Lance's extensive experience serving at the state and local level in key leadership positions makes him an excellent Public Works Director nominee. So it's my pleasure to introduce him today.
The man who needs no introduction. Go ahead, Mr. Wilber.
All right, thank you for the introduction. I think a little bit about me, those of you who don't know, I arrived in Alaska in 1965. My dad was in the Coast Guard originally, and then he entered into the Army, and he got restationed at Fort Richardson. And at that time, he lived out in Birchwood. I went to kindergarten at Birchwood Elementary, and then I went to grade school at the old grade school out off of the Old Glen Highway. And then as my dad got restationed back to the East Coast, I came back here and lived on Fort Richardson. I went to Mears, graduated from Diamond. And then when I graduated from Diamond, I went to Oregon State and met my wife in Spokane. I've been married for about a little over 25 years. I have 2 grown kids. And so that's a little bit about me personally. I have really enjoyed my time in the municipality, and I've enjoyed everything that I've done. I've learned a lot. I think I have a lot of experience. Even before I came here, I had work in the oil industry, I had work in the construction business. So I've had the pleasure to do a lot of different things, see a lot of different things in the municipality. And outside all of the opportunities I've had at traffic, transit, budget, and at DOT, I think one of the things that I've learned is that even with all of those responsibilities of providing those direct services departments, one of the things that I think some directors miss is the importance of working with folks in HR, the ability to hire in the event, unfortunately, we might have to discipline, the ability to reorganize. It's really important to have a relationship with them. It's also a very important relationship to have with IT. As Saxton had mentioned, a lot of the technology advances we've had, the ability to work with IT is very important. Obviously, budget, if you can't get your point across on the resources that you need, you can't deliver the services. And if you don't have those resources, it's imperative that we explain what we are able to do with the resources that we have. The law department, obviously, anything that we do, if we're in a situation where we have a concern or a complaint, we want to make sure that we're following the rules and that those things are done. And then not in any particular order is purchasing. And I think it's really important for any department to be able to procure services and make sure that you can do that in a timely, streamlined way is really important. And one of the things that Adam has, Mr. Trombley and Mr. Thompson had mentioned to us is, what are some of the ideas that we might have in order to expedite delivery of services? And so I've talked to Mr. Colhays and I've talked to Saxon about some of the things that we might be able to do. And when I was in the Office of Management and Budget talking to the previous purchasing director, Mr. Haddon, one of the things that I always was looking at, what could we do to do things more parallel while having the same level of approval and review from the assembly. In the procurement process, the assemblies has made some changes on the grants, on the amount for the approval. And I'm looking to figure out a way in which we might be able to stream that process that while still following Title VII procurement rules. I'm also looking at some options when we build a capital budget. Right now we build a capital budget, then we put a bond package together, then we get the approval of the bonds. Is there a way in which we can expedite that with the same level of approval at the assembly level so that we can get those dollars out on the street sooner without providing any risk to those that might be bidding? So trying to figure out a way in which we can make that a little bit tighter. Our construction season is so short. And when you're on that timeline, if there's a way in which we can still have the same level of review, the same level of approval with the existing process that we have, but if we can do it a little bit more concurrently or do it in a way in which we report of the things that we've been done. So I've been talking to the new purchasing director to figure out if there's an opportunity we might be able to work out. It's going to change, likely changes to Title VII, but we're not looking to remove any of the assemblies approval, just looking at a way in which we might get more authority or a way in which we actually present it in a time. So there's a lot of things to be worked out in that arena, but that's one thing that I'm looking forward to doing in Public Works, because not only will it help in the project management engineering side of the house, it could also help in the services that we would provide on the operation maintenance side of the house. So I think those are things that I'm really looking forward to as the Public Works Director. I think when I sat down with Mayor-elect Bronson and he asked me, what is it that I wanted to do? I told him that I could work as the O&B director. I would be able to do the O&B director, but I really think that job always needs a fresh look. I think it needs a new set of eyes. I've also told them I'm always going to be available, if they ever run into any help or any need, that they can count on me to help them wherever I can. Hopefully I'm not going anywhere. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to be Public Works Director. And I really appreciate Mayor Bronson allowing me this opportunity to do it. I think I have a really good rapport with a lot of other departments that's going to make Public Works very successful. And I was taking very good notes from some of the questions you had of Saxton. So both on shared services to street maintenance and a variety of other things. So I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Mr. Wellington.
Thanks. Can you just outline, so you'll have, there'll be Adam Trombley, Ron Thompson, and then you, someone, is that?
So the,
And then what departments are you over? Describe the org chart, I guess.
describe the org chart. The org chart as I've seen it is Adam Trombley would be who I report to, and then Ron Thompson and I would be parallel on that organizational chart. Also in that organizational chart would be, so that's how those would be. And then I think there's also GIS, I think would be parallel to that, and real estate services. I'm not sure about the real estate services piece. And then under me is management operations, PM&E, and I think portions of traffic or all of traffic would be under me. I don't know if that's finally been decided, but it's a traditional public works department, kind of a layout.
Was your hand up, Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, and then
Okay.
also.
First, Ms. Alto, then Mr. Dunbar. I just want to make sure. I couldn't tell if you were just pointing to her.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So to follow along Mr. Weddleton's question there, what do you see the role of Public Works in alignment with those other, is it three
Sure.
directors, all to support economic development? Or I guess when we heard from Mr. Trombley, I heard a lot about the building side, but I didn't hear a lot about economic development. So I'm just kind of curious of what you think your role in coordinating with those other directors, all to kind of
Sure.
fulfill the office's overall responsibility.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So in the development community, there's public development and private development. And I think a lot of the questions and the issues that Mr. Trombley has been focused on are some of the concerns that the Bronson administration heard on the private development side. I really haven't heard a lot of concerns on the public development side, but doesn't mean that there's not opportunity to do that. But there's still, with private development, there's public, not only in the road side of the house and the maintenance side of the house, there's also the utilities, but obviously the utilities are not reporting to Mr. Trombley. But in those two arenas, it still has to do with the development. And if there is an opportunity where we know a development might be coming on board, if there are public assets that need to come to bear to support those things at a particular time, if we have the ability to do that, I think that's where it is. It's all about the economic development side. And there are two pieces. They should always be working together. Frankly, they always have. It's just how they're done. I think that relationship will continue. Don't think it's been a constraint in the past, but I do believe that Mr. Trombley's focus is right now on the development side. He also is aware of how PM&E and maintenance and operation has been run. I think they've been very efficient, very good crew in both of those organizations. So yeah, looking forward to working with both of them, and if there's things that we can do better, then give it a shot.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this question sort of harkens back to your time as the O&B director, but it also relates to what you're doing now, because it seems like there's been the largest structural changes within the sort of, I don't know how to describe it exactly, sort of the planning and development area of the municipality. So what I've had difficulty getting a handle on is the Bronson administration expanding the number of executive and appointed positions, or are they just shifting them around, changing the names? And I can't quite figure it out. So has there been an increased number of these kind of executive level positions, or is it the same number, they're just all called different things?
Sure. As far as the total organizational, Mr. Dunbar, I don't know. I can tell you inside the development services area, the new public works director, there used to be a public works director prior to the Berkowitz administration, and it was structured basically the same way as the Bronson administration is proposing.
And so I guess my question is, was there a PCN, was somebody in it at that point? And you, so
Yes.
whose PCN are you?
So in the Berkowitz administration, there was no public works director. All of those departments, PM&E, development services, traffic, they reported directly to the municipal manager.
Right.
Previous to Berkowitz administration, there was a public works director, and that public works director reported directly to the city manager. PM&E, M&O, and traffic did not.
Yeah. So I would like, and I guess this is a question maybe for you, Mr. Shabaka, or the current community manager, if you can relate it to her. I would like a stronger sense of this, because we've seen lists of the new people who are being appointed, and there's new terms, and positions that didn't exist in the Berkowitz administration. But I also know that, for example, one of the deputy municipal manager positions now, they've taken that slot and filled it with something else. It's called something else. And I want to know sort of the total picture relative to the prior administration, the Quinn Davidson or Berkowitz administration. A little less concerned about the Sullivan administration, although the fact that your position existed before certainly is important. But we recently created a position that had existed in prior the assembly. We reinstated it basically last week, and we got this huge amount of pushback about you can't create new positions. And I'm just trying to square that with all these other new positions that exist. Now, if the case is all those new positions are actually in slots that were just called something else, then that's fine. But it's just a data point that I would like to have. So if anyone on the team, and you just seem well positioned because you were the O&B director until very recently. So if anyone could get us that answer, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Member, I think that answer may probably best come from the HR director at some point in the future, off topic of this hearing, but thank you, Mr. Wells.
Thanks. You mentioned briefly kind of paralleling the approval systems, it's streamlining, I guess, so projects get out the door quicker. I think everyone's goal. I'm surprised. Sometimes it seems like we've approved something's already started, which is a little, maybe it's the best way to do it for project by project, but something to be avoided. But you'd also said something about the dollar level of approval. And I know that sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot of time in our meetings. You have a public hearing and no one speaks and then you move on. But sometimes it's a trivial amount of money. So streamlining that some way, I think, would be appreciated by the public who's sitting through our meetings and also us.
The chair, Mr. Weddles, I agree. And I think it will also help purchasing's workload too. I think if we have the ability, and because we're all trying to get in the door at the same time. And I think if we have ability to do that and you're aware of it and the process is clean and clear and transparent, hopefully it will expedite that because, some of the rules that we have been able to change, though, they're 10 and 15 and some of them are 20 years old, and the cost of actually doing things, the limits need to be adjusted, but the process should be the same. That's kind of what we're looking at.
But thanks.
Ms. O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. I've been thinking a little bit about the public versus private intersection, particularly when it comes to economic development, as you explained it. And so I had like 2 minutes here to think about it, but what I've been thinking about it is, one of the costs to developers is putting in roads and a significant infrastructure for development. So be interested over the course of time that you're here to see what your thoughts will be on how either that should continue, maybe be modified, in particular to bring down the cost of home prices, as well as to what extent the role of the utilities might help draw some of those costs down with the stormwater utility that we're currently exploring. So it just seems like, while we often think of the public side maybe as not as integrated with the private side, it does seem like there is significant opportunity because those costs can drive the private development side. So it's just mainly my thinking through it more as we kind of continue on. I'm just reminded of an issue we've had in West Anchorage about the continuation of septic and wells and how all of that impacts the cost of private development. So I think it's something where we should probably have more conversations, not just from the Title 21 side or the private side. We should probably be having the private-public conversation as we look at those issues.
I would agree through the chair. I also think that one of the most valuable assets, or sometimes a constraint, is time. And the ability for the private sector to do some things and the ability we have to do things because we're dealing with public money and we have to have a process in which we actually go through to manage and spend that private dollars. We're under a lot more review, as it were. It's not that the private section, the private development community is of a lesser. I mean, obviously they have people that are financing. They have to make sure that they're following the rules, the permitting, making sure all of the ways in which they're constructing. They just have a different set of rules of engagement and a timing than the public sector does, for good reasons. But so that, I think, is probably one of the things that we need to be aware of in both sides. I think, from the public sector's side, being appreciative of the timing of financing, the ability to get materials in a particular amount of time, the rules, the procurement process. It's different than it is on the private side. I mean, they're have investors that have a moment in time or a smaller window in time in which they're willing to invest in a particular product or delivery. And so we're building on a capital program. They're building on opportunity. And so we have to make sure that those two things come together at the same time. One of the most important things about our capital budget is to implement our planning documents. It is literally the dollars to implement the planning documents. So where those things come together is really, I think, one of the jobs of Public Works.
Mr. Dunbar.
So I'm still trying to understand exactly what the Public Works Director does. And so I'm curious what role you play in developing the bond in particular, which is one of our major sources of capital projects now. So to what degree do you help shape the bond as a policy document, or do you just implement it once it's been passed?
I'm going to do both.
Okay.
I'm going to recommend to the administration what I think a reasonable bond is based on the amount that we can deliver, where it is. It's not a secret that our infrastructure in Anchorage is aging rapidly. And our ability to get to that, to address all of those needs we have to be thoughtful about the timing to do that. I'm going to present a proposed capital improvement budget to the administration. It's due Friday. And as well as an operating budgets for all three departments. And I'm going to give them my recommendation on what those projects should be and why, and then what would happen if we don't do them, and what alternatives we might have. And that would be my recommendation to them. If they decide on the bond amount for whatever reason, then for a total bond or just a road bonds or facilities bond, then we'll implement their directive. But I'm going to tell them what I think.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? To what degree at all are you informed by the CIP lists that are passed by the community councils?
So very, particularly on the roadway side. And obviously I have a connection with Office of Management and Budget, who's managing those things. So one of the things I did ask when I got over at Public Works is I wanted to see the list of projects that the community councils were in their top list, and are they in our proposed list? And if they are not, why? And so that is the conversation I'm having this afternoon with them. So.
Great, thank you.
Before you go on, I had myself in the queue. So I'm inspired a little bit right now to think. I've heard some concerns and seen some missed opportunities already for projects to be kind of supported through grant applications to the feds. Newness in the departments and some various elements make it so that it's hard for the department to apply and be prepared and ready and on point to get funding. I mean, I've already seen $2 million lost on homeless response just due to the turnover. But we have a massive federal infrastructure bill that is very likely coming to pass. And if that's the case, in the context of any proposal you're making for a bond package or other projects, I'm hopeful that you're able to fulfill what you suggested. You're ready to help other departments to see the opportunities, because I would hate to have the municipality miss out on billions of dollars, or potentially a big chunk of billions of dollars, on our deferred maintenance and just things that we need to see upgraded, because they don't have the right people in the right seats. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I would offer two things. We have, there's a list of needs, and they could be in the public infrastructure or in the private infrastructure. But on the public infrastructure, just look at the priority needs in order, not looking at the color of the money. Like, the color of the money influences two things. It influences the time in which you can do them and the scale of the job that you want to do. Federal money is not without cables, chains, and a lot of restrictions. So you have to recognize that the timing when you can turn around with federal dollars is not the time that you can turn around with local dollars. Local dollars, it's a lot quicker. state dollars, it's a little bit longer, and federal dollars, it's a lot longer because there are different rules. So unless the rules change with the dollars, you will be able to get some things done, which would be great, but we should target on larger things or a group of small things to make one large project. So I'm aware of all of those things. You know, the state's going to get a lot of money too. If we're going to get the dollars, federal dollars directly to the municipality, that makes a difference on what we do with it and when what we do with it and how much we're actually going to get. So, Mr. Constant, I'm very aware of that. And I think I'm very interested to know what the Bronson administration's anticipations are, you know, what their ideas would be for these dollars, what infrastructure improvements they might want to do. That's going to influence I suspect that will influence their decisions on the bonds. We're going to put a capital program together. The amount of money that we're going to get from the federal that we could get, that's going to occur while the capital budget is submitted to the administration before it probably gets delivered to you to October. There's, you know, depending on the amount and the time, it could influence our capital program. So I'm willing to.
Thank you. Mr. Wellington.
Because of time, a comment, not a question, but when you're making your kind of list of needs, kind of generally out of your vision probably is areas outside of our zone. You know, so you've got Subversa, Turning an Arm, Hillside, Girdwood, and so on. And so those lists don't generally go to you, but there are definitely needs on those roads and so on. And when the federal infrastructure bill comes out, it could be the doors open to use it there, particularly if there's no match on some level of project. So going forward, don't forget those areas, from wrapping the roads to connections for wildfire, whatever they are, bridges and whatever, you know, Eagle River as well. So
Through the chair, Mr. Wilson, I'm well aware. I've had to talk to Moira Robinson about the limited road service areas and what their needs are, and you know, how much money do they actually have available if they have to do some capital projects. Again, you know, a $50,000 federal job can cost you $25,000 to manage. So it'd be great if we did, you know probably $50,000 jobs and just do it as a package, and they just let the limited road service areas do it, and we can help them manage it. So lots of options.
thanks.
Yep. Ms. Alto, will be the final question.
Yeah, so as more money flows in for infrastructure and other things, I guess this might be a comment or just something I want to flag. We saw this with the Academy Vanguard project, is making sure that we stay in our working through capital improvement, the capital improvement budget, in touch with AMATs and what might be coming through there, or what projects DOT may be wanting to expedite that could have, I guess, downstream effects on local roads and areas, since we did feel that quite acutely in that particular project.
Absolutely.
I would add a layer to that I speak of to just about everyone who listened when we pulled the item off the bond, right? Because it was planned starting in the year 2001, and it made it to the process in the train that DOT likes to talk about, that projects keep moving forward and they've got to be on track. Otherwise, you're causing the end of the world. It's clear that the funding mechanisms have changed dramatically, 180 degrees. It used to be that the state would pay for capital items for their projects, but now the state doesn't. And so I'm anticipating that there are a number of projects in the queue that are going to fall under the same kind of problem, that if we're not careful, the municipal taxpayers are going to be on the hook for millions and millions and millions of dollars of state infrastructure. And what we saw with the Vanguard project is that DOT came up with money. It's amazing, and it's not taxpayer money. And so I'm hopeful you can guard against kind of us being on the hook for their priorities that they would in other times have paid for.
The benefit that you have is I used to be the Central Region Director, so I kind of know how they think a little bit. And I also understand why they're imposing some of the requirements they are. And it's not, in my experience, a reflection of how we have operated. Central Region is a very big region. And so it's how other jurisdictions inside that region have influenced a policy that has to be applied everywhere because of poor performers in other places.
And funding dynamics.
I'm
Thank you. With that, then I'm going to close this hearing. Do members need a break now? Do you want to wait until after the next half an hour?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you. See you on Tuesday. Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes. We'll take 5 minutes.
So, Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
can we not officially